שלום לכם, אני עקיבא ביגמן וברוכים הבאים לפרק נוסף של הפודקאסט שלי, אידיוטים שימושיים. מה שיש לנו היום זה רעיון עם דוקטור אדוארד לוטפק. דוקטור אדוארד לוטפק הוא היסטוריון ואסטרטג יהודי, הוא מתגורר בארצות הברית. הוא מכיר טוב גם את הצבא האמריקאי, גם את צה"ל, הוא ביקר בישראל המון, כמו שתשמעו ברעיון, הוא גם היה פה במהלך מלחמות, הוא ניתח אותם, הוא כתב על ישראל לא מעט. החיבור המרכזי שלו דווקא נעשה על ההיסטוריה של האימפריה הרומית, זה נקרא האסטרטגיה הרבתי של האימפריה הרומית, והוא ניתח את האופן שבו האימפריה הרומית התגוננה מפני הברברים דווקא בשלבים המאוחרים שלה, לקראת הדעיכה ולקראת סוף האימפריה הרומית. בין היתר הלקחים שלו מהאופן שבו האימפריה הרומית נהגה בתקופת מה שאפשר לקרוא לו אולי המלחמות הקטנות, שהתמודדה מול סוג של מקבילה למה שהיום אנחנו קוראים טרור, כלומר היא הייתה חזקה ולא היה נגדה אויבים מדינתיים גדולים, אבל התמודדה מול פלישות חוזרות ונשנות של ברברים בגבולות, והייתה צריכה לפתח אסטרטגיה כדי להתמודד עם זה. התובנות שלו מהניתוח של האימפריה הרומית משפיעות גם על איך שהוא מנתח את מה שקורה היום בעולם, ואחד המאמרים הכי מפורסמים שלו נקרא מלחמה פוסט-הירואית, שבו הוא מתאר בעצם את המלחמות שיש היום במערב החל מסוף שנות ה-80, נפילת ברית המועצות. זה מלחמות שבהן בעצם אין הצדקה להקרבה, מכיוון שאין כוונה באמת לנצח או להכריע אויב, יש פחות הצדקה להקרבה של חיילים וחיי אדם, לכן מדינות נוטות לנהל כל מיני מלחמות טכנולוגיות, אש מנגד, לנסות לחסוך בחיילים ולמצוא חלופות להכרעה וניצחון, חלופות לתמרונים קרקעיים. אנחנו מכירים את התופעות האלה היטב מצה"ל, אני דיברתי איתו כמובן גם על זה. הרעיון איתו מתקיים באנגלית, לוטפק הוא אמריקני והשפה המרכזית שלו לפחות היא אנגלית, למרות שהוא משבץ מדי פעם מילים בעברית. אני אוספתי כתוביות למען הנוחות, אז מי שפחות נוח לו להאזין לזה בפלטפורמות כמו ספוטיפיי או אפל פודקאסט, מוזמן לצפות בווידאו שנמצא בערוץ היוטיוב שלי, יש שם כתוביות מלאות של כל הרעיון, וגם אני אעלה גרסה טקסטואלית של זה באתר מידע. לפני שנתחיל אני רק רוצה להזכיר לכולם שאנחנו פועלים לפי עקרון 5 המ"מים, העקרונות הימניים השמרניים שמאפשרים לפודקאסט הזה לעבוד, ואלו הם מנוי, מגיב, משתף, ממליץ, מחבב. החשוב מכולם הוא מנוי. בזכות המנויים שלכם, בזכות התמיכה הכלכלית שלכם, הפודקאסט הזה יכול לעבוד. עשינו דברים יפים מאוד, סדרת הרעיונות עם פרופסור משה שרון הגיע מאוד רחוק, וזה רק בזכות המנויים שלכם, וגם הפודקאסט הזה, הרעיון הזה, לא היה יכול לקרות בלי המנויים. שאר הדברים חשובים לא פחות, להגיב לדברים האלו ברשתות החברתיות, לשתף אותם, לדרג אותנו גבוה בכל הפלטפורמות שבהם אתם צורכים את הפודקאסטים, זה מקדם את התוכן, זה מאפשר לנו להילחם בגופים גדולים וכלכליים הרבה יותר חזקים שעומדים מאחורי התקשורת המרכזית שלנו היום. מי שעושה את הדברים האלה, אני מודה לכם מאוד, כל זה בזכותכם וזאת לא קלישאה. אז תודה רבה לכולם, אני מאחל לכם צפייה והאזנה נעימה. Right. Okay. So first of all, I want to thank you for joining me on my podcast. It's a great honor. I've been reading your works for several years and following you also on social media. I would like to start, if we may, with let's talk maybe your general understanding of what's happening currently now between Israel and Gaza. And maybe we can begin with actually what went wrong. How did this war actually start? What went wrong? What would we miss? Israelis, the idea of our government that caught us off guard in this way.
Well, first of all, in the 1970s, this is the first war in which I am not in Israel and not participating. So in 1973, I was actually caught by surprise. I arrived in Sinai only like 3 days afterwards. So in 1973, roughly 20,000 Egyptian troops of the first wave crossed the canal. There were 22 Maoizim, Bar-Lev line. Only one of them was fully manned with a modest number of 1 machlaka of soldiers, maybe a little more, like 30, 40. The others, instead of having a machlaka, they had a few soldiers, just a few soldiers. The total number of Israeli soldiers on the right side of the Suez Canal were 411. 411. Now, why did that happen? It happens because if you allow an enemy to build his strength right in front of you, which is what happened by 1973, the Egyptians were not deployed near Cairo, they were deployed right at the canal. Once you allow them to be on your doorstep, there is no way you can be ready for the attack, because if your intelligence tells you they're going to attack tomorrow, you immediately reinforce your line. You send more soldiers. They look and they see that you have more soldiers, and they don't attack tomorrow. Therefore, the chain of information that told you that they would attack is discredited. So let's say in Machleket Merkar of Amman, in the research department of Amman, where I used to work with, there was one officer who said, the Egyptians are coming, the Egyptians are coming. So the command sends many soldiers there. The Egyptians see the soldiers, they don't come. The other officer, the one who said they're not coming, they can't come because they cannot possibly start a war, because they would lose a war, because in the end, the Israelis must win the war because of Tel Aviv, because of this and that. So the officer who was correct and said they will attack, when you send the troops to guard, they don't attack, is discredited. And the other officer, the one who said they won't attack because they can't win a war, what kind of thing this is? He gets promoted and become very important. Only after the war, the officer who warned uselessly, because nobody listened to him, they made him ambassador to Hungary. His name was Maroshi, also known as Maram. The other officer was called Yona Bandman. I used to work with Yona and Maroshi. Okay, Yona was a real Israeli Sabre. Maroshi was a Hungarian Jew. And Maroshi was studying the Egyptian army, and Bandman was studying the concept that they will never start a war because they can't win a war. Okay? Which happened to be wrong. So, in other words, if you allow Hamas to acquire an capability to attack you with thousands of people, you then cannot possibly protect against it, because if you hear information that they're going to attack on October 6th and you send immobilize and you send Onugada there, they don't attack. Then you go home and they'll attack again. In other words, you cannot allow somebody to be in your front door with a gun in his hand and then try to use clever methods to deal with them. You have to come out and you have to fight them. You cannot allow that. That is the fundamental. The people who blame Netanyahu and say that he sent all the troops to, I read in the New York Times. The New York Times now is like a gallery of stupid sort of anti-Israeli stuff. Much of it produced by a guy called Ronen Bergman, who tells everybody that he was in some kind of intelligence special, this and that. Mr. Atzvai, at the time when, it's not today's Mr. Atzvai, but Mr. Atzvai was the place where, really, the lowest would go. He was hired. He's a staff writer. He's well paid to write anti-Israeli stories. He is the anti-Israel correspondent. And now, what I read there were things like, women soldiers warned, and because there were women, they were ignored. This was, one story, okay, and all kinds of fantasy stories. Okay. Now, the worst thing for all these people is that actually the Israeli Matkal decided that this time, at the end of the fighting, there will not be the man standing at your front door with a gun. In other words, to destroy physically Hamas, which, contrary to legend, is feasible if you fight hard enough. And so the question now is, did they kill 9,000 and wound 9,000? Did they kill 9,000 and lifetime disable 7,000? It's not clear, but that is what the aim is. The aim is to continue fighting until Hamas as an organization does not have a fighting strength. So that also the people of Gaza can see that if you vote for Hamas, Hamas does not give you victory, but will destroy your house. That's the message. Okay. Support Hamas and so on. So the only people who can really support Hamas enthusiastically are Arab Americans at Georgetown University Medical School, whose names were published by the Washington Beacon, which I'm going to put on my Twitter account, who all wrote stuff supporting Hamas and so I just want to make sure that their future patients know that these people support murder and all these other stuff, So anyway, the Israeli government's decision to fight this war, to win the war, is a shocking thing in the Anglosphere, because to fight to win is so passé. No, you fight in order to, I don't know what, you have an endless war like Afghanistan, Iraq, and so forth. The idea of victory is a kind of strange one. It's eccentric, but actually it's possible to do it. It's possible to break this organization. And I'm happy to say that the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, which announced the intention through the voice of the foreign minister that they want to proceed to have relations with Israel, to cooperate with Israel, as they saw the Israeli seriousness in fighting Hamas, they reinforced their position. Mm-hmm. And the last statement from the foreign minister, who, by the way, is a remarkably intelligent and well-informed person, he could be a foreign minister advantageously of a lot of other countries that have worse people than him. He's a very capable man, this foreign minister. His very last statement was that in order for Saudi Arabia to have formal relations, formal diplomatic relations, Israel, they don't need a Palestinian state all established. All they want is a declaration of intent. This is like, if you say you want to do it, that is good enough for them. Of course, everybody knows that diplomatic relations between Israel and Saudi Arabia are not to open relations, but to formalize relations, to make them public. Winning wars is a good thing. It gets you allies.
Right.
And this Saudi ally is potentially very important for both countries. This would be a great thing. It's so
let's get back to
when I was last in Saudi Arabia, mm-hmm. I had no talks with the ruling prince or anybody else, but I stayed in a couple of hotels, and all I heard was Hebrew in the elevators. Right. And so diplomatic relations are to formalize a relationship, not to initiate a relationship.
Right, that's very different. So I want to get back to the military operations now in Gaza. Do you think the Israeli operational plan is the right kind of plan? There's a lot of criticism in Israel that we should have had a different kind of plan, maybe lay a siege on Hamas, maybe attack the southern district of Rafah first, and then get control of the Rafah crossings and the tunnels underneath it. Because we have a feeling we're fighting Hamas, but we're supplying, at the same time, we're supplying Hamas with supplies, with food and medical supplies, etc. And Hamas is resupplying through those tunnels. So maybe the whole operational plan should have been better. What's your take on that?
Well, the fact is that Israel, the Israeli government decided that they did not want to starve out the population. And by the way, it would have put the burden on Egypt, because if Israel did not allow trucks to arrive in Gaza from the port of Ashdod, the trucks would arrive from Egypt. That would create all kinds of problems. Egypt is a de facto ally of Israel. It's one of the constraints on Israeli policy is that this is not an alliance that should be played with and endangered.
So you justify this decision. So
yes, Because the essence of what's going on in Gaza is the fighting Hamas, getting Hamas to come out and shooting them, killing them. The essence is to grind down this force. Now, what's wrong when you grind down, like the classic case in history, the Battle of Verdun, is that you kill one German, but you lose one Frenchman.
Right.
And here, as you know from the actual casualty numbers, total IDF losses, minus IDF losses from October 7. October 7 to the morning of October 8. So you take the losses from the moment the campaign started.
From the actual war.
Yes, and I'm going to ask you, since you're in Israel, what is the number of IDF soldiers killed when from the beginning of the Israeli offensive? Not the ones that were killed accidentally October 7th. What is the number?
We're talking about like 350, maybe 60, something like that. It's like, yeah.
Yes, but the total number is 586. The total number of IDF soldiers killed, including October 7, is 586. Therefore, the number killed in Gaza cannot be 586 because many of them were killed in 24 hours.
Yeah, it's like 300.
Rush attacks. People rushed, individuals, units, pieces of units rushed into action, and they lost casualties.
Right.
So the number killed in the whole Gaza operation is 586 minus the number killed October 7 to morning October 8, which is about 250. So the actual number is very low. It's extremely low number. Why is it such a low number? Well, first of all, because of technical reasons. But there's good training, of course. This is intensive training. American soldiers went to war sometimes with something like 14 weeks of training, 16 weeks of training from the day they entered the army. And nobody is in Gaza who did not have at least a year's worth of training, minimum. Both individual training and unit training, at least a year's worth, minimum.
Right.
That's a very important fact. Second important fact is that there is a lot of the losses in urban warfare are from incidental fire. That is, you're going from A to B and somebody sticks his head out from a window and shoots you while you're sitting in the truck. Well, nobody's sitting in trucks. When they have to move troops, they can put them in a Namer. The Namer is the world's most heavily armored vehicle, plus protected with active defense, trophy, and so on. So Israelis have a way of moving in combat without incidental casualties, not from the people you're attacking, but people who are all around you. And of course, the mortar, Margima, in the street next to you. You're going down this road, there is a street next to you, behind these houses, and somebody puts a mortar and the mortar lands and so on. Again, you're sitting in a Namer, you don't care about that. So that's one thing. The other thing is that nobody in the field there has the illusion that you can do something like tunnel warfare, that you see a tunnel entrance, okay, let's go, boys, yalla. No, you don't. You wait until the Yahalom person shows up. He's the one who finds the booby traps, the explosives, etc., etc. So it's expertise, the discipline of it, and the fact that the command, the people giving orders from the top are saying, go and kill them. It doesn't say in a hurry, now, quick, because there's going to be a ceasefire. They're acting from the beginning. And this is the reason why, this has been good leadership. From the beginning said, go and kill them. They didn't say rush and run and take huge risks to do it quickly because there's going to be a ceasefire. Why is that? Because Israel's position is different. In 1967, when I was in the Etzba Galil, where there were no soldiers because the army was in Egypt and the army was in Jordan and in southern part, Syria maybe, but in Etzba there was nobody. So this is not known to military history, but I had the Chechi, and I actually won the war. Nobody knows this, but I killed the Syrian with the Chechi. I did, and I have his helmet in my room here. Wow. If you want, I could show you the helmet. But I didn't really win the war. But what happened in that fighting was that everything Israel was doing was under the threat of ceasefire imposed. When the Arabs are winning, there's no ceasefire. When the Arabs are losing, there is a ceasefire. Right. That was then, when Israel had no allies. No allies. When I won the war in '67, the Israeli army did not have a single piece of equipment from the United States, other than 1944 Zaklamim, half tracks from 1944, and some Shermans. Only France. But when I arrived, de Gaulle also said that because I arrived in the Middle East and changed the balance of power, he stopped all supplies to Israel. I'm sorry about that. In other words, Israel had no allies in 1967. It was very popular. All the young leftists would go to work in kibbutzim. Students loved Israel. They would demonstrate for Israel, and no allies, complete isolation. Therefore, it had to fight quickly. People died because they had to be done quickly. In 1973, it had one ally, United States. But when the US wanted to send airplanes, they could not overfly any European country, no European country to get to Israel. So they had to fly within the 1.5 kilometer flight corridor between Morocco and Spain.
Right.
And by the way, American supplies in Germany could not be sent to Israel. They had to be sent 3,000 kilometers to the Azores and from the Azores back. So 67, no allies. 73, one ally. And today in this war, well, there is the United States, there is the United Kingdom, there is Germany, there are other countries all over Europe, more than Israel needs, not to be in a hurry and not to have to fight under terror, because they're neither the Security Council or in real life or anywhere else. And even the countries which have been speaking against Israel, like Russia, have been speaking against Israel. Latakia air traffic control is working for Tel Aviv every time they fly in Syria, and they do a very nice job, by the way. One day they should go and visit them in Latakia. They have actually a nice headquarters. There's good food there, very good food. And of course, China has also spoken against Israel. I noticed that Hainan Airlines is flying to Ben Gurion Airport again. They just restarted flying. And of the Chinese joint ventures in Israel and outside Israel, not one of them has been cut off or interrupted, nor did any Arab country break diplomatic relations with Israel.
Right.
So this is not just a tactical victory over this tunnel that. It's not yet just operational victory. This is a strategic victory, which is all possible because the world is allowing Israel to carry out the necessary function of killing enough Hamas people so that the organization no longer functions. And that is a realistic aim. Now, why that is not revenge. I hope there's nobody who's idiotic enough to think that this is revenge for October 7th. Not at all. This is to establish the proper status quo. Namely, you can't have somebody in front of your door with a gun in his hand and then think you can manage him because, I don't know, Qatar gives him money or something. You can't do that. In October 7th, in 1973, October 73, you cannot tolerate the Egyptian forces right in front of the Telah. Today, you can't have Hamas. That's it.
What do you think should happen in Gaza the day after the war? Let's say in half a year when we're done grinding down Hamas. That's a big question. Who would rule there? What would stop Hamas from?
Right. Okay. So we all know. Everybody knows that when the Europe got UNRWA, UNRRA, 11 million refugees were moved from Europe to the world. that are standing in DP camps, displaced persons camps, DP camps, waiting to reconquer their homes in Sudetenland and things like that. Okay, that thing has created the population of welfare dependents, people who are fed by UNRWA, who therefore have a reason not to move from Gaza, because if the moment they leave Gaza, they lose their free food, their free medical care, housing relief, and all the rest of it. That has to end, but it can't end with forced migration, forced deportation. Nobody's going to take these Palestinians and put them anywhere. Not in the desert, not in Las Vegas, okay? Nobody's going to do that.
Right, of course.
But what can be done is that the individual people from there can get jobs in other countries. For example, in Saudi Arabia, where they have 8 million Pakistanis or whatever, they can have 1 million Palestinians, but not by having any policy declaration or announcement, nothing at all. Simply social media hiring a plumber. They need plumbers. You hire a plumber, the plumber goes. After a year, if he doesn't talk Hamas and doesn't speak, doesn't misbehave, you can give him a permit to bring his family.
Right.
Once you take out 1 million workers from Gaza and their families follow them, you solved the problem. I'm not saying that this is probable, easy, whatever it is. I'm just saying it's the only way of solving the problem. The only way to get out from this tunnel, there's no other exit. Now, I believe that the Saudis are smart enough to understand that. And so long as nobody talks about it, it could be a very good solution.
We have to start with shutting down UNRWA, and then this will initiate a natural process of immigration.
Yeah, but you can't shut down UNRWA and say, now you're not getting food, and why don't you get a nice job in Las Vegas? You can't do that. What you have to do is that you have to have action, or first action, with jobs beginning to be offered through social media in Gaza and so on, and the West Bank as well. And people take these jobs, and then they move to the jobs and so on. But since apparently the plan of the ruling authority in Saudi Arabia, the plan is to achieve a big elevation by combining Saudi money with Israeli technology in joint ventures, employing many young Saudis who will learn the business.
Right.
They want to learn the business.
Right.
They are different people than they used to be. And to do all that, they have to have quiet. And to have quiet, they have to replace 1 million Pakistanis with 1 million Palestinians as laborers, as doctors, dentists, radiologists, plumbers, whatever it is. This has to be done, and it must not wait.
Right. So another aspect of this war is the IDF had shortages of equipment, mainly 153 caliber gun shells. We know the shortages also with Air Force munitions and other munitions. Some of this has to do with the buildup, this forced buildup that Israel has been working on in the last 7, maybe 20 years. That meant investing more in high tech and Air Force and smart bombs, and less on the actual on munitions and storages. And we depended on the American storage we had. You think there's a lesson to be learned here? Maybe we should be more classical about this.
Now, the problem with 155 millimeter howitzer ammunition is the following. Now, let's say we are meeting for the budget, okay?
Right.
We're meeting for the budget, and a minister comes in and says, I have this ultrasonic weapon. The other says, I have this ultra-electronic weapon. This is a Star Wars weapon. And then somebody timidly comes in from, and says, I just want to buy some old-fashioned 155 millimeter howitzer ammunition, because the artillery, the artillery is not so glamorous as the Chelavir jet fighters and is not like the Merkava or something. The artillery is a terrible thing because you are moving these heavy things in the battlefield and they not do anything. You never see a picture of an artillery man doing something. They're just sitting there and nobody talks about it. It's very unglamorous. The only thing they do is they win wars. That's the only thing. And
Right.
and so the artillery is a kind of medieval weapon, actually. There's been very little, even though they keep talking about the new shells, which have all kinds of stuff. The fact is, you want to fire a lot of firepower quickly, precisely, and you do it. So they're always the last in the queue because they're not sexy. Okay.
Right.
In 1967, when, as I told you, I won the war in the Galil, but the actual fighting was the big fighting was, of course, was in the Sinai. There was the famous battle of Katef, Abu Agelia, Katef. And in the battle, Israel brought forward these 25-pounders, which are British World War II field artillery, which had to be pulled, not self-propelled. And the commander of the artillery was called Baruch. His name was Baruch Barchin or something like that, but he was a Russian. He spoke with a thick Russian accent. He was a veteran of the Red Army. And he told me, he said, I had these 25-pounders, I trained people, and we never did anything with them. And then we brought them forward, and we attacked the Egyptian trench line. That is how the Battle of El Arish was won. It wasn't won with the helicopter at San Khanim. They were very nice. They helped. It wasn't won by anybody else. It was won by these old-fashioned, 25-pounders, which is like 170 millimeter light field artillery, quite similar to what Napoleon was using, almost, and they only fired, he says, all those years, and they only fired for a few minutes. But that few minutes is when you won the Battle of El Arish. You just win. The Battle of Katef. Mm-hmm. You won it with that. So artillery never gets enough money. So welcome to the club, okay? In Israel, too, doesn't get enough money. Now, there is now, of course, but there's a fact that in 1967, that would not be there'd be no solution because nobody will sell you any ammunition. And when you capture Russian things, they don't fit because it's 100 different caliber, right? Today, the Ukraine war has used a lot of the ammunition stored for a lot of the 155 howitzer ammunition, but the countries that have it, the countries that produce it, they're willing to sell, and they can be bought. And it's simply that it cannot be done very quickly. So but Israel has Margimot. Israel, unlike the Western forces, Israel has 160 millimeter Margimah Kfeda, 160, and the bomb of the 160 can do the same job for many situations as the 155. Those bombs were made in Israel, and they can produce them.
There's also the 120 and the 80. There's several.
Yeah, well, the 81 is standard part of equipment.
Right.
And the 120 are also, only the U.S. Marine Corps used them, not the U.S. Army, but the 120 is a serious weapon as well. You can do a lot of work with 120.
Yeah.
Of course, the range.
In Israel, they have them at the battalion level, the 120.
Yeah, exactly. But they also have the 160, and the 160 really delivers the punch. It's a very powerful weapon, and you have to do that. And while you remedy this problem of no glamour, not sexy. El Totachim, in general, the whole artillery is not sexy, and buying howitzer ammunition, when you combine the super electronic gizmo, and the ultramarine UAV or whatever, it's a problem. Everybody has a problem. When the Ukraine war started, it turns out that NATO, which has that have very little ammunition, actually. And they used it.
Yeah, that's why they took some of the U.S. storages in Israel because of that.
Absolutely. They took it out and sent it because the purpose of the storage in Israel is exactly that. The Israelis couldn't complain.
Yeah, I know. It's part of the deal.
Yeah, absolutely. But anyway, I know. If everybody's very annoyed that this medieval weapon, this ancient weapon, is still necessary. But it's only people like me who have actually been in war who know how really necessary it is, because the ability to deliver the ammunition on target in direct conjunction with the ground force. So you are advancing towards that hill and they're shooting at you. And now you don't have to talk to the Helavir and all that kind of stuff. You just go up the chain. There's a howitzer there, a single howitzer can clear a mountaintop. That's it.
Yeah,
wonderful stuff.
Yeah, so part of what they thought will happen in Israel wanted to replace artillery with unmanned aircraft and things like that. And
Please don't do that.
They
don't deliver. They do not deliver the instant heavy fire. They don't. Okay, it's not like you're there and you call and say, I need some power on this mountaintop or this hilltop or this position, and a minute later, woof, it arrives. Now, don't replace it with some UAVs or whatever it is. You don't need that precision very often. What you need is a big noise and a big thump, not precision. Precision is a wonderful thing, but people who don't know war, overrated, systematically overrated, because it's all highly theoretical. But if I fire a single pistol, if I'm in a war with China and I fire a single 9mm round, a pistol round, but with extreme precision, and I kill Xi Jinping, I win the war. That's this is like how you catch birds. All you do is to put a little powder on the tails. That it's precision is very important and is very overrated.
Right. And also there's the whole problem with weather and availability, and it's very
all of that stuff.
What happens if you have a lot of requests from the field and there's not enough aircraft? We see this happening in this war.
You have all kinds of issues. That's why in the end, when the real war starts, everybody goes back to the stupid medieval ancient howitzer. That the word howitzer simply is a gun which has a bigger, instead of going a longer range with high velocity, has a shorter barrel to deliver more explosives at closer range.
Right.
It's interesting how the weapons that have been replaced are not the howitzers, but the actual guns that were technically known as rifles. Israel never actually had them. Jordan had these long-range artillery. 175mm very long-range artillery. But that stuff with a very long barrel, very hard to move and very hard to deploy, very delicate because of the high velocities involved, much higher velocity than howitzers. So no, it's howitzers. And that's the thing to have.
Right. So I want to ask you about the United States policy regarding the war. My observation is that because of our shortage in munitions, Israel has a bigger dependency on the United States and other allies to provide for basic items of war. And the question is if the United States, the Biden administration, may be taking advantage of this dependency to push for a Palestinian state, or maybe to have some kind of switch in government in Israel and promote their agenda in the Middle East, their Iran agenda and other agendas they're trying to promote. What's your take on that?
Well, Israel depends on the United States to the degree that Israel wants to fight and win this war without higher costs, without risks, without more risk, may cost and so on. But the truth of the matter, I believe, is that when the war started, President Biden himself, personally, as an individual, got the news the way you got the news, the way your daughter got the news.
Right.
And he responded like this. We must help Israel immediately with whatever we can. Then he remembered that Hezbollah exists. So he ordered an aircraft carrier. And it so happened by chance that the available aircraft carrier, this is the Atlantic Fleet actually, was the newest and largest, most powerful aircraft carrier the United States has. And then he sends the aircraft carrier, and then he says to Hezbollah, basically, dear Mr. Nasrallah, I hope you're well. Don't think about joining this war. Because even though I only have 48 strike aircraft on my aircraft carrier, only 48, the fact is that they can get really close to Lebanon. Usually they have to fly 200 nautical miles, 300 kilometers, 400 kilometers before they can drop a bomb. Here they fly only 20 kilometers, 30, well, not 20, but it's 40 or 50 kilometers. So they can deliver much more ammunition. They can empty out the magazine. And this is a help to the Israeli Air Force at that moment so that they can also, it adds to the bombing. An aircraft carrier is like 2 squadrons of the Israeli Air Force. Okay. Right. You know the word for squadron in Hebrew, right? It's like 2 of them. It's not more than that, but still a big help. So Biden came forward acting like he is the Sar HaBitachon of Israel, reacted the same way, and so on. But along the way, he is paying a political price for this war with the left wing of the Democratic Party. And because his competition with Trump is going to be very, 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 very close, he needs them. And although he's paying a price for 2 things. One, because he refuses to close the the southern border, the border with Mexico, because the left wing of the Democratic Party says that nobody is illegal in a stolen land. In other words, the United States was stolen from the Indians. Therefore, the United States has no right to keep any other thief out of the United States.
Right.
Right? And therefore, by the way, doesn't really have a moral right to defend itself. The left wing of the Democratic Party are not actually part of the American political community, but they still have the vote, even though they're not really American. They don't support the United States of America. They oppose the United States of America, but they still have a vote. So Biden has this problem. So he tells the Israelis, please use less air power. Please use less artillery. And he knows that this means use more here. And he knows that this means fewer pictures, media stuff in exchange for more blood. Okay, they know that. Right. But the Israeli decision makers, the Sar HaBitachon, Matkal, and all these people, they know that Biden has this problem, a real problem. And therefore, Israel has the problem that they don't want to have many Israelis killed because of this Hamas trash, right? So, but each knows the other problem. And this is not like 2 people who are quarreling each one is fully 100% aware of the other side's problem. So this is like one of those perfect situations in a negotiation where each side is aware of the other's necessity and there's been a trade-off. Now, the truth is that air bombing in Gaza was of limited value, sometimes very important, mostly not important. The use of heavy artillery was necessary, not always. So there's always a discussion.
Right.
And
this may be the difference between the first stage and the attack on the Gaza, the northern part of Gaza, and the second stage in the attack on the Khan Yunis.
No, it wasn't the question. It was the southern or the northern. It is that they every day the war continues. It's a political cost for Biden every day. And when there are the American media are basically their picture is always a Palestinian child. It seems that the whole Israeli I did not know this, that the whole of Tzahal, from the Sayed Matkal to the Chel Avir to the artillery, actually want to kill Gaza children. Okay?
Right.
And the only Gaza children they don't want to kill are the ones of the
cute ones.
Hania's nieces who get treated in hospital in Israel, and simple as that. So, but as I say, considering the past and considering everything, considering the 1967 when Israel and the United States was neutral, strictly neutral in 1967.
Right.
1973 when it was not neutral, but was really limited in helping because the Europeans blockade. I mean, I mentioned the fact that they wanted to send howitzer ammunition, since you talked about it, 155 millimeter they had huge number in Germany. They wanted to fly them to Israel. They couldn't fly them to Israel. They had to fly them to the Azores.
Right.
And all the way around the world, 6,000 kilometers to go to 2,000 kilometers or 8,000 kilometers to do. Compared to that, situation is different in that regard as well. And
okay,
there'll be two.
I want to ask you another question. You wrote a famous article, I think in Hebrew, almost everybody involved in military science has read it, about post-heroic warfare.
Yes.
And my question is, you wrote this article, I think like 30 years ago, maybe? It's like the beginning of the 90s.
Well, I was just noticing the fact that when patrols, I write books. That is true. I confess, I write books. I even write articles like post-heroic warfare article and so on. That is all true. But I've also made a living as a military contractor. I have, I had the honor of actually carrying out war operations myself as a contractor, which is a much better situation to be a soldier, because first you get paid for it quite well, and secondly, because you don't care what the political echelon wants. You're a contractor, and you can do whatever you want to do. So, and post-heroic warfare simply noted the fact that the exchange rate between blood and resources and blood and victory, you give up a lot of things to have fewer casualties. And Israel was always casualty sensitive. So in reality, the whole world needed the article, but not Israel, because in Israel, it was always post-heroic. The IDF, the Tzahal, has never treated soldiers as ammunition. What people did in the First World War, famously, because there are movies about it, they used soldiers like ammunition. Actually, They did it in the Second World War too. And actually, they always do it. They did it in Korea. And they did it in all the wars. And then when they stopped doing it, that's because they were fighting wars which were specifically not for victory. You asked an American general what you're doing in Vietnam, he could not tell you, I'm here to win the war, because the way you win the war is you don't fool around. What you do is you go to Hanoi and you win the war. Right. They had no intention of going to Hanoi. And then there was Iraq, where they had no intention of winning the war and all that kind of stuff. So in all of those situations, why should I die if you don't even want to win the war? So post-heroic warfare article, which everybody reads, should be read with the other article I wrote, which is a war about victory, the concept of victory. I wrote the whole book about that. Right. If you don't have a victory concept, you have no right to ask a soldier to risk his life. No right
So you
at all.
think in
Like,
Israel
let's say
also,
Israel was doing Hamas the way the Americans were doing Iraq, Afghanistan, that kind of stuff, which you have
right.
to manage it, and you have a lot of economic development, and you build clinics for them, and you hope that they will change. No, they won't change. This war is a war to kill Hamas operatives.
So yeah, that's what I was about to say. Israel
If
was
not kill,
post-heroic.
disable them.
Israel was post-heroic in Lebanon and against the Palestinians and Hamas for like 30 or 40 years. And this is actually what brought us to here, because we were
Yes,
not
sure.
and now maybe this is what changed.
Yeah,
Finally, this is a heroic war, not a post-heroic war.
exactly. And in a heroic war, the casualty issue doesn't arise. Therefore, it's so fortunate that the number of Israeli casualties from the start of the counteroffensive, which is, let's say, from afternoon of October 8th, to be very specific, has been such a low number. Why such a low number? Because of high level of training, because of Yahalom specialists, because of the Namer, because of this, because of that, and everything else.
You think the Israeli tactics and the strategy that's deployed successfully in Gaza, as you say, is it scalable for Lebanon? You think the same IDF and the same tactics used now in Gaza, can we
Yes,
deploy them in Lebanon successfully?
Yeah, but there is a difference. Hezbollah is not the same as Hamas. Hamas doesn't care if every Palestinian dies, so long as there is the victory for Hamas. Right. If you ask them, are you willing to lose 3 million Palestinians? Yes, of course, for victory, because it's not for us, it's not for Palestine. They're against the Palestinian state. They're for Allah.
Right.
And also, nobody dies, actually. I mean, only the women die. But not the men, because they got 72 virgins and so on.
Right.
I myself, I'm thinking right now of converting to Islam. It's only a matter that I want some evidence. I would like to see them. I would like to see the 72 virgins, and I might really convert myself. So, Nasrallah is different. Nasrallah has Shia Lebanese in the south who vote for him. Mm-hmm. They have beautiful houses, many of them. Yeah, when you go there on the road, on the Shvil Petroleum in the Etzba Galil, such small, you see beautiful houses. Actually, very nice.
Yeah.
They don't want to lose them. He doesn't want to lose them, so he can be deterred. He is being deterred right now. And there is an interpretation according to which Nasrallah is actually a member of the Iranian Revolutionary Guards. And if Khamenei orders him to launch the attack against Israel, he will do it. There is that theory, okay? There's another theory. My theory is that he's a political leader. See, Arafat was willing to have every Palestinian dead so long as Palestine would be victorious. Right. But Nasrallah cares about his people. So I believe it can be deterred. Therefore, I don't believe it's necessary to fight the war. But what is necessary is to say to Nasrallah, if you fire one pistol round, 9mm, after you no longer need to do it in order to cover yourself for not helping Hamas. Remember the famous press conference. Before the press conference, there were all these stories that he's going to announce now Hezbollah attacks, now bam, bam, bam. He arrives there and says, oh, nobody told me. Nobody told me there was a party. Don't expect me to come to the party. Nobody told me. I mean, I only discovered it from Israeli television that there's a war, So it's very embarrassing for him, but he didn't participate. He won't participate. And so far, more Hezbollah people have been killed. There are roughly 10 times more Hezbollah have died than Israeli soldiers. And he's willing to pay that price. So he's not in. I don't think it's necessary at all. Because
we started this discussion when you said it's a problem to have the enemy build up on your border. We're having
right, but the build up. Okay, that is totally true. But the fact is that in order to destroy this threat, you don't have to do, you're not dealing something like Gaza, fighting Hamas. You're dealing with something that is, you have a deeply entrenched enemy with all these nature reserves.
The underground,
the nature reserves that they have. Every village, the villages are converted. They have minaret and so on and so forth. And there is a problem of physical destruction could be done remotely. That is to say, Israel could actually use firepower, send the Miluim home to watch television or to work or whatever they want to do, and do it all with firepower. And demolish southern Lebanon and pave it, turn it into a parking lot. They can do all of that, okay? But I don't think it's necessary to do it.
Okay, so one final question before we're done. You also wrote about the way empires collapse.
Sorry?
The way empires dissolve or collapse.
Yes.
Specifically the Roman Empire. And I wanted to ask you about your observation about the United States today. Are we facing maybe like the end of the empire?
Well, no, United States is not, in fact, in that going in that direction. What happens in the United States is that back in 1776, they made a revolution against King George of England. George was actually a very nice man. Really, he was. They shouldn't have rebelled. But they had the revolution, which started in 1976, and in 1776, and this revolution has never stopped. The United States has never stopped being a revolutionary country. So it goes waves. Okay. So now there was a wave when it shows all about the blacks and the browns and colored and so on. There's a wave going this way. Everybody is left wing. Suddenly everybody's left wing. Everybody in America has become like Berkeley, California. Okay. And then now there is the counter wave. And the counter wave, there's an equilibrium, then there's a counter wave. And I'll give you one piece of information. Dartmouth College reintroduced the exams, the SAT exams. So before that, they didn't have this exam. So the people were chosen by the Black employees of the diversity office, which then wanted to have a quota and so on. And then these poor people suffered and they were not happy. So when the war starts, they can all go, don't have to study. They can just go carrying Hamas signs and all that stuff. Well, they brought back the exam. There was a revolution. Now the counter-revolution is starting. And if you read the New York Times and Washington Post political articles, what you are reading is basically like a psychiatrist listening to a very neurotic patient, very neurotic, because they keep saying Trump cannot win. Of course he cannot win. Naturally he can't win. I mean, what a question. Could Trump win? Never. And who would vote for Trump? I don't know anybody who would vote for Trump at all. So when Trump wins in November, which is very probable at this point, then what's going to happen is that the counter-revolution will get much more executive energy in it, but it may be weakened by it. If Biden wins, the counter-revolution will continue very strongly. Suddenly, Americans, for example, until last week, Americans accepted the open border with the South, with the entry not only of nice Mexicans, but also Pakistanis and Africans, Muslims of all kinds, Afghans, terrorists, murderers, and so on. Well, now suddenly everybody understands that the border has to be closed. In regard to Hamas students and all that, all the colleges said, we can't do anything. And now it turns out they can do something. The group of Georgetown students, whose names I'm going to put in my tweet because they're my neighbors, Arab students in Georgetown who wrote medical students, not literature students, medical students, put their names saying, I love the murder, it's great, killing, raping, it's superior, and then they want to become doctors. Well, sorry. So the Washington Free Beacon, which is one of the most important newspapers in the universe, publish their names. So they got a lawyer to try to stop them in some. So just in case they succeed, I'm going to put it in my tweet, and so that they will never ever be allowed to be doctors. So the counter-revolution will happen. It might be slowed if Trump wins. Trump will have a lot of executive action, but he will weaken the counter-revolution. Without Trump, the counter-revolution is going to sweep it right off. So that is what I predict for the United States.
Do you think maybe the United States, as opposed to other empires throughout history, has some kind of energy in it that it can
Yeah, correct. The revolution never stops. The energy keeps up. So every time they descend, decline. I entered in the Pentagon in 1975 when the Khmer Rouge grabbed an American ship. A U.S. Navy ship went to help that ship. They broke down because Congress had cut the budget, so they couldn't maintain the thing. Then we sent a second ship, and it also broke down. Okay? So that was Vietnam. And then there was So the United States was finished with Jimmy Carter. Clearly, it was a finished power, okay, with Jimmy Carter. And then 3 months later, Ronald Reagan comes, and boom. It turns out that it's not the United States that collapses, but the Soviet Union.
Right.
And the same is going to be. The problem of Islam is a different one. But when I look at the flight arrivals at Ben Gurion Airport this morning, and I see airplane is coming from Abu Dhabi and all that kind of stuff, it tells me that that problem also is going to be solved. If you want to find atheists in the world, one place to look for many atheists is the Muslim world. Atheists. It's very unusual. When you stop somebody and they say, I'm an atheist. How come you're not praying? Answer, I'm an atheist. The Jews don't say that. They say, I wanted to go to the shul, but, I had to play golf. The doctor told me to play golf. I can't help it. And so, no, the Saudis say, I'm an atheist. So even that problem will be solved.
זהו, אז פרק נוסף של אידיוטים שימושיים מגיע לסיומו. הרב עם לוטבק היה לדעתי מעניין ומרתק, אני שמח שביצעתי אותו. אני רוצה להודות שוב לכל המנויים והתומכים ומגיבים והמשתפים והמחבבים. בזכותכם הדבר הזה יכול לעבוד. מי שעוד לא עשה מנוי, אף פעם לא מאוחר, תעשו מנוי לאידיוטים שימושיים באתר מידע, יש קישור בתחתית הוידאו הזה. החל משבוע הבא אנחנו נחזור לשגרה, אני כבר סיימתי עם המילואים, אנחנו נחזור לפרקים היותר מוכרים שלכם של אידיוטים שימושיים, עם אינפורמציה וניתוחים של מה שקורה אצלנו במדינה. השמאל בינתיים לא כל כך נח, ואנחנו נצטרך להתחיל גם לעסוק בשמאל, למרות שעוד לא סיימנו להכריע את חמאס, אבל יש גם מלחמות אחרות שחייבים לנהל אותם. אנחנו נחזור בכוחות מחודשים. תודה רבה לכולם ולהתראות.